Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Stellar Development Foundation's Q3 2022 quarter in review. I'm Carolyn Yee, Communications Manager at SDF, and we're glad you're here for this overview of the Stellar Network's progress in Q3. So first today, SDF CEO and Executive Director Denelle Dixon will recap some Q3 highlights and the 2022 roadmap. Next, our VP of Ecosystem, Justin Rice, will share an overview of our latest network stats and provide updates to the first building block on our roadmap, which is increasing scalability and network innovation. He'll also recap some noteworthy progress on Soroban, and which is the smart contracts platform built on Stellar. Then Denelle and our Chief of Staff and VP of Communications, Lauren Thorbjornsen, will walk us through how we're activating more network participation, and Lauren will report on what we've done to demand and promote inclusion. So we'll leave some time at the end for audience Q&A. So please go ahead and submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A tab in Zoom, and we'll get to as many as we can. So I will turn it over to Denelle to get us started. Denelle.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us here today. We're grateful for your attention. There have been so many exciting developments this quarter, and so I really want to dig in. So let's recap a few noteworthy moments. As a team, we participated in 25 events and industry conferences, including our own. Throughout most of Q3, we were hard at work prepping to bring the ecosystem together in Rome for Meridian 2022. We had more than 100 speakers participating in over 45 sessions across 3 stages. And after 2 years of virtual Meridians, it was just amazing to have over 380 people from the ecosystem and community join us to learn, to network, and to celebrate what we're building together. It was truly just so many special moments. Smart contracts continue to be a high priority for SDF, with Tomer Weller, SDF's VP of Tech Strategy, announcing at Meridian that Soroban is now live on FutureNet. To encourage building on Soroban, SDF also announced a $100 million adoption fund with the first incentive program, Sorobanathon First Light, rewarding eligible devs for testing Soroban and sharing their feedback. We also released a report on blockchain sustainability, and Lauren's going to share more about that a bit later. The outcomes that we've seen this quarter are a result of the ecosystem coming together to advocate for the utility and real-world solutions that this technology already enables. Our roadmap continues to guide us toward this progress. As a reminder, as I always like to do, the 2022 roadmap is made up of 3 strategic building blocks. First, we're focused on increasing network scalability and network innovation. Second, we're activating more network participation. And third, we're really demanding and promoting diversity and inclusion, not just at SDF, but in the ecosystem. Taken together, these building blocks help us on our way to create a more equitable access to the global financial system. I'll be back shortly to share updates on our second building block, but first I'll hand it over to Justin to walk us through what we've done this quarter, which is a lot, to increase scalability and network innovation. Justin?
Great, thank you, Denelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Rice. I'm SDF's VP of Ecosystem, and I'm going to recap our progress on increasing scalability and network innovation, starting with some key stats about network activity and growth. After that, I'm going to highlight some progress bringing native smart contracts to Stellar, which is a big priority for us this year. And there have been some real significant technical achievements around that. I'm excited to get into them. First, the numbers. So as a reminder, to measure and assess growth of the network over time, SDF consistently tracks a set of select metrics and compares them year over year with their 2021 equivalents. And because the Stellar Ledger is a public record, anyone can see what's going on the network at any time, so feel free to check these numbers. Let's start with a milestone for total accounts. Stellar surpassed 7 million total accounts in the third quarter of 2022, which is a 25% increase year over year. Next, total number of payments. The total number of payments grew by 114% year over year. There were 64 million payments in Q3 of 2022. That's compared to 30 million in Q3 of 2021. Next up, total operations. So total operations represents raw network activity, and that's because operations are all the functions that change the state of the ledger. They include payments and path payments, orders to buy and sell assets, deposits into AMMs, basically anything you can do on Stellar. This quarter, the network surpassed 956 million total operations. That's a 49% increase year over year, almost a billion operations this quarter. Now, given the current market conditions, right, it's very heartening to share these metrics for Q3. A billion operations. The Stellar network continues to provide real-world utility and to do what it's meant to do, which is to drive access to faster and cheaper payments. So now let's take a look at how accounts and payments are driving volume, both on Stellar's decentralized exchange, aka the DEX, and through automated market makers, or AMMs. Overall, combined DEX order book and AMM volume in Q3 surpassed 24 million lumens worth per day, which is an 85% increase year over year. So how much liquidity is available specifically in AMM liquidity pools? Between more than 14,700 unique pool providers and over 5,800 liquidity pools, there was approximately $16.3 million in total value locked. Now, granted, total value locked is down, and that's because of the overall market downturn, but we've actually seen an increase in both unique pool providers and in pool count since last quarter. So more people are participating in liquidity provision, and that's a good thing because one of the goals of introducing AMMs was to democratize market making. Now, for a bit more insight, let's examine some metrics that speak to SDF's mission, which is creating equitable access to the global financial system. These metrics track what we call relevant assets, which are assets that are tethered to real financial instruments. So think fiat currencies like Argentinian pesos, US dollars, that kind of thing. Tracking these assets, it gives a clearer sense of how much Stellar is really connecting global financial systems. In Q3 of 2021, 89 assets qualified as relevant, and they had a combined transaction volume of $232 million worth. As of Q3 2022, the number of total relevant assets has decreased year over year. So now 79 assets qualify as relevant. That decrease, well, that's because we strengthen the criteria around what we count as a relevant asset, and we will continue to examine and improve those criteria over time. However, despite the slight decrease in the number of assets that qualify as relevant, we've actually seen an 11.9% increase in the on-network transaction volume of relevant assets. So in other words, there are still more real-world transactions. The last set of metrics I'd like to look at today are focused on decentralization. So first, let's look at the average ledger close time. It clocks in at just over 5.8 seconds, which is great given the network activity in Q3. As I mentioned, we saw almost a billion operations this quarter. So the network, given that volume, it continues to operate reliably and consistently. The decentralization of the network is consistent with last year. They're the same number of tier 1 validator nodes, 23. There are actually more total nodes, 173 this year versus last year's 129. So that's it on metrics. Now, normally at this point, we look at progress on caps and SEPs, but today we're going to switch things up a bit because in Q3, most of the team that works on caps, they were focused on Soroban implementation, and most of the team that works on SEPs, they were focused on the Anchor platform. So Denelle is going to talk a bit more about the Anchor platform in a minute, but I'm going to focus on this quarter's work on Soroban, a new smart contracts platform built on Stellar. There's been some exciting progress, and there's been some real technical achievements. So we made a commitment to communicate early and often about this work, and we have definitely stayed true to that. At Meridian, we announced that Soroban is live on FutureNet, an incentivized public test network, and I will talk about that more in a moment. But first, let me just step back. So when we decided to bring smart contracts to Stellar, we did a very thorough inventory of what was out there, and we compared it to what we wanted, to our desired properties, and nothing that existed fit the bill. We were looking for scalability, but most smart contract systems out there, they're not optimized, they're not built for concurrency. Many have crippling fee regimes. We were looking for sensibility, but we found ambiguous systems that kind of leave developers confused about best practices. And we were looking for a consistent developer experience, but most ecosystems are sort of plagued with a patchwork of tooling that has varying quality. So we decided to build a new standard ourselves, and we decided to build it on WASM and Rust. Soroban was designed for scalability, batteries included functionality, and reliable access to financial rails. So that means that we are harnessing the best of what Stellar has to offer, like speed and reliability, a global anchor network of on and off ramps and assets, including worldwide cash access. It is really designed as a platform for developers who don't want to compromise between performance and simplicity. And it is designed by developers who don't want to make you choose. If you want to find out more, you can go to sorbonne.stellar.org. I'm going to reiterate that in a minute. But where are we in the process right now, right? What does the rest of the timeline for Sorbonne look like? To answer those questions, I'm going to break protocol a bit here. I'm going to cover some things that are not technically bound to Q3, but for such significant work spanning so many teams and so many quarters, it seems like the right thing to do. This year has been busy already for Sorbonne development, and we're moving really fast. In fact, I'd say we're moving faster on this than we've ever moved on anything before. In Q3, we put out 2 preview releases. The August 1st preview release, it included initial versions of the Sorbonne environment, an SDK and a CLI, and it let developers write and test contracts on their local machine without depending on running a network. The September 13th preview release took into account initial feedback and helped us continue to refine the platform and to add new features to extend its functionality. And then on October 12th at Meridian, we announced the 3rd preview release and the launch of Sorbonne on the FutureNet, which is a first iteration of an incentivized testnet. So early adopters can now write and deploy their own smart contracts in this Sorbonne testing environment and provide feedback in real time. We also announced a huge adoption fund, $100 million to be precise, that will go towards supporting developers to test and build on Sorbonne. And we announced Sorbonne-a-thon First Light, the first incentive program to award these funds to developers for testing Sorbonne and sharing feedback. Looking further into the future, we'll work to bring more iterations of the FutureNet, along with more incentives throughout this quarter and into early 2023. And in Q2 of 2023, we'll gear up for launch on mainnet. Now, until then, right, the various iterations of FutureNet are really vital. The more feedback you share, the better. We need collaboration to build the smart contracts platform the Stellar ecosystem and the world in general needs. And that brings me back to the $100 million Sorbonne Adoption Fund and its first program, Sorbonne-a-thon First Light, which is a fun and low-lift way to tinker with Sorbonne. So Sorbonne-a-thon First Light, that's the name. It gives developers a structure to begin testing out Sorbonne and to provide valuable feedback that will help shape Sorbonne's future development. And developers can earn rewards for doing that. So we're looking for any kind of content, big or small, from video walkthroughs to practical tutorials to GitHub issues, anything in between. And each qualified submission can earn a reward of 250 to 3,000 lumens. The content generated during this stage of Sorbonne is going to help us kickstart the ecosystem. It's going to make onboarding easier. And crucially, it's going to help us identify bugs, issues, or blockers. So if you're a developer, go right now to sorbonne.stellar.org and join the Sorbonne-a-thon. When you go to sorbonne.stellar.org, you'll also find a way to join the Stellar Dev Discord, and that's where we'll be announcing future rewards programs first when they go live. So you should also join the Stellar Dev Discord. Thank you so much for listening and for contributing to this work alongside us. Denelle, I'm going to pass it back to you to lead us through the next building block.
Thank you, Justin. So everyone, go to sorbonne.stellar.org. I should give you some time now to do that. And join our Discord. I am so excited about how Sorbonne is coming along and all the opportunities to work with the ecosystem to make it the best it can be. Keep engaging with us, make it the best it can be. I'll turn us next to the second building block, activate more network participation, which covers objectives for technical strategy, ecosystem engagement, policy, advocacy, marketing, and investments. The headway that we make here is how we ensure we're growing in an agile and mission-oriented way. In Q3, we made a total of $12.5 million in investments. We may be in a down market, but builders still need support. So investments are just one way we activate network participation and introduce the network to even more opportunities. So let's start with the Enterprise Fund activity this quarter. We made a $5 million investment in Wave. Wave is a fast-growing mobile money app in Africa that is addressing problems with mobile money. They currently serve over 10 million monthly users in 4 countries and are expanding access for users to transact, pay bills for free, and send money more affordably. This is an opportunity for us to connect in users who can benefit from the advantages of Stellar in a truly meaningful way. We made a $5 million investment in Securency. Many of you may know that name because they've been a part of the Stellar ecosystem for years, and they were integral in developing the clawback feature that was part of Protocol 17. This investment strengthens our relationship with a leader in digital asset issuance and management. And finally, we provided $2 million into an accelerator fund through DFS Labs to support founders building the future of digital commerce in Africa. We partnered twice in the past year with DFS Labs to host successful boot camps that onboarded African fintech startups to Stellar, and we're looking forward to more collaborations with them to support African startup leveraging blockchain technology. On our last call, I shared that we made a $10 million investment in Q2 that we had to wait to announce what the company was because they were doing a name change and rebrand. Well, we can now share that the company is NetXD, which enables businesses to manage their asset securitization and custody needs. This investment will help support them to build out their asset securitization capabilities on Stellar. Stellar will serve as the public blockchain for NetXD clients, providing greater transparency and auditability, lower cost, and ultimately expanded access to digital assets. We also made a matching fund investment in Q3. Stacks is a universal money app that enables users across Africa to access their bank accounts and mobile wallets in one place without using mobile data. It's pretty cool. This investment will support Stacks in building an affordable, borderless mobile wallet on Stellar, making Stellar-based assets, including USDC, more accessible to users who want to hold their money securely and participate in borderless commerce. Much of our partnerships efforts in Q3 were focused around driving Stellar adoption among promising wallets, with some help from USDC. It's a remarkable snapshot of the breadth and depth of adoption we're seeing in the markets across the world. So here is what Q3 progress looked like. WireX, a wallet which boasts over 5 million users, added support for Stellar USDC, enabling users to transact with Stellar-based assets using the WireX MasterCard and withdraw value in cash at ATMs. This service is now live in the EU, the UK, and the Asia Pacific. Ledger, a company trusted by 4 million customers, launched USDC on Stellar on Ledger Live, an open source app that connects directly to the Ledger hardware wallet. Alfred Pay, a fintech building a LATAM-focused remittance platform leveraging USDC, began rolling out in the Dominican Republic and in Haiti. And crypto payroll company Bitwage, which serves remote workers across Latin America, the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia, implemented support for USDC on Stellar. Bitwage's users can now receive any percentage of their salaries in USDC, including Argentinian UFC fighter Guido Canetti, who is receiving 100% of his salary in USDC on Stellar via the Vibrant wallet. I just want to reiterate how gratifying it is to see this progress that our ecosystem is making and on such a global scale. On the product front, we launched the Anchor platform at Meridian, an out-of-the-box software solution that makes it easier and faster than ever for businesses to integrate with Stellar. We've been working on this for a while, and I am so excited that it's available. With one integration, businesses can plug the Anchor platform API into their existing infrastructure and access Stellar's payment rails without the need for custom integrations. They can bridge their services to wallets, applications, and exchanges in weeks rather than months. This is a solution that makes me so excited about the ever-improving interoperability of Stellar. The next updates under this building block are all about marketing. So I'm going to welcome Lauren, who is our Chief of Staff and VP of Communications, to take it from here.
Thank you, Denelle. And thanks everyone for being here today, and happy Halloween. I have a lot to share as the marketing team has continued to drive messaging and news around our key priorities and participated in many events this quarter. Our fairly new thought leadership avenues that we launched earlier this year for Denelle, Tomer, and Justin are really going strong. Denelle's new podcast, Block by Block, it dives into timely topics at the intersection of crypto, tech, and society. These conversations aren't specific to things happening on Stellar. They're an opportunity for Denelle to reach out beyond the network and bring you interesting talks with people about how blockchain tech is changing the world as we know it. And she hosted some pretty heavy hitters, including Sigal Mendelker of Ribbit Capital, Avishal Garg of Electric Capital, and Janet Foudy, executive chair of the board for Deloitte US. I would just want to say, make sure to listen to and subscribe to what's coming up, because we have some exciting guests lined up to take us to the end of the year. And Tomer hosted guests from CoinMe and Ledger over on Tech Talks with Tomer. If you missed them, you can catch up on the YouTube channel. We're also going to have some more coming out talking about Sorbonne in the next couple of months. And then Justin put out another issue of his Substack newsletter called the Soft Fork Bulletin, all about blockchain state growth and what challenges arise once it hits hardware capacity. It's always interesting stuff and very substantive. So be sure to subscribe if you enjoy a thoughtful long form piece every once in a while. The SDF team also showed up at many industry events throughout the busy fall season. You know, one conference I want to highlight is Circle's first Converge conference. Circle is a really important partner. You hear us talk about them a lot. And it was exciting for us to have so much representation of the work that the Stellar ecosystem is doing at that event. First, Denelle took the stage twice to discuss our groundbreaking work with MoneyGram, and as well as how blockchain and crypto can be used for social impact. Paul Wong, who's our director of product for CBDCs and institutions, he spoke on a panel about the regulatory and technical considerations of CBDCs versus stablecoins. And lastly, Jake Urban, who's from our partner engineering team, he's a tech lead there, participated in a session on architecture and application of USDC. And he spoke about how the ecosystem is currently leveraging USDC on Stellar. So that was busy. And at the same time, we were just a few weeks away from welcoming many of you in Rome, as Denelle mentioned, for our 4th annual Meridian conference, which took place from October 11th to 13th. If you've been paying attention, you know that we always describe Meridian as a forum for industry leaders, developers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers to really discuss how we're taking action to build the world we want to see. And if you were able to join us in person this year, you know that's not just marketing lingo. I was really personally struck by just how diverse the mix of attendees was this year, and the feeling of bringing almost 400 people together who are all contributing to the growth and innovation of Stellar in their own ways was really a special experience. And with the help of our ecosystem, we brought together over 100 speakers for 45 sessions across 3 different stages. And they were talking about the theme for Meridian 2022, which was the urgency of doing. And this was inspired by a quote from Leonardo da Vinci. And it really set the tone for conversations that emphasized and motivated action. Denelle opened the week hosting a fireside chat with Alexis Ohanian, who's founder of 776. And we closed the week, Denelle closed the week by giving a keynote on what it means to be trusted and trustless to a full house, as you can see in those pictures. We celebrated some significant milestones that you've heard folks talk about on this call already, like the launch of the Anchor platform and Sorbonne on FutureNet. And we were able to bring together representatives from ecosystem companies like MoneyGram and Circle to discuss their ongoing work and share announcements from newer partners like Wirex, who announced support for USDC on Stellar, and Novati, who announced their forthcoming Australian dollar stablecoin, which is hitting on November 1st, tomorrow. We welcomed policymakers, including Commissioner Caroline Pham of the US CFTC, and Andrzej Kowarek, who's the member of the European Parliament, who's actually implementing the EU's landmark legislation on digital assets. They both had fireside chats on smarter regulation. We also welcomed representatives from international aid organizations, which I know a lot of people were excited about, including UNHCR, the World Food Program, and the International Rescue Committee. And they were talking about how we could leverage blockchain together to improve the delivery of humanitarian aid. And all week, the partner stage was full of discussions of the real-world utility of crypto and use cases being driven by the Stellar ecosystem. The demand for technical content was also clear given the popularity of talks on the developer stage by the SDF team, academic partners, and technical leaders from across the ecosystem, talking about my favorite topic, for example, what is real TPS? So all of this plus plenty of networking at partner booths and brain dates and festivities, including a welcome cocktail and an evening gala. It really made for many opportunities to connect with old and new friends face to face. And we want to say thank you to everyone who made the trip to Rome to join us. We don't take for granted that time, the expense, and the effort it takes to attend. But for those of you who couldn't join us, hopefully we'll see you in 2023. But if you want to catch up on what happened this year, recordings will be available this week on the Meridian website and on our YouTube channel. So stay tuned for that. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I'm going to move over to policy. So both domestically and internationally, SDF engaged with key policymakers and more on matters impacting digital asset policy. So here are a few of the highlights. In the US, Congress considered two main issues during Q3: establishing a framework for stablecoins and providing clarity for how digital assets should be treated by regulators. And in both areas, SDF was engaged with policymakers on Capitol Hill, the administration, and regulatory agencies. And then in September, Denelle actually testified before the United States Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry on the Digital Commodities Consumer Protection Act. That's a mouthful, but that's bipartisan legislation created to empower the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, as the authority to oversee digital commodities. And, I encourage you all to check out Denelle's testimony on our website, because she, offered some clarification on the ways we think about digital assets and whether we think we should categorize them as a security. She illustrated it with a really, I think, easy to understand example about a state fair. So it's worth digging into her testimony, because this is a discussion that is sure to continue going forward. And then globally, SDF has continued to engage with central banks, international organizations, policymakers, and academics on financial regulation and policy. So for example, the policy team is tracking legislative and regulatory developments in the EU and UK, specifically in shaping the final text of the transfer of funds regulation and commenting on the implementation of the EU markets and crypto assets regulation, which is MiCA. And the policy team also continues supporting the prototyping of CBDC solutions in Brazil and Indonesia, together with a consortium of ecosystem partners and financial entities. That's just a snapshot of some of our policy work this quarter. Look out for more details in the full report on our website. And then excitingly, we also continue to contribute to the broader dialogue on blockchain sustainability this quarter. You guys have probably been hearing us talk about this a lot this year, but we finally released the full report, Embracing Sustainable Blockchain Innovation. This is the continuation of work we started earlier this year when we developed a first of its kind assessment framework with a methodology to quantify the environmental impacts of a blockchain protocol. And so this report kind of outlines that methodology behind the assessment framework, explains the quantitative considerations, and provides supplemental materials that other blockchains can use to assess their own footprints, which we really hope happens, that this kind of is a tool for other blockchains to use. We launched the report during Climate Week and engaged the ecosystem through a Sustainable with Stellar initiative on social media. Hopefully you guys saw it. Partners posted on their channels to spread the word about why they build on Stellar with sustainability in mind. And we also hosted our first LinkedIn Live event to dig deeper into the topic of industry sustainability with Wire. We hope this work is a step towards more transparency across financial services, including in blockchain. So we're all building together towards an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future of finance. All right, now I'm going to quickly talk about our last building block before we open it up to questions. I'll cover how we're demanding and promoting diversity and inclusion across our work. So as a reminder, this building block's objectives include how SDF can leverage research, our mandate, and network effects to achieve our mission of equitable access to the global financial system. Let's start with the Stellar Community Fund, SCF. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. It's a program that offers anyone building on Stellar the chance to secure support and funding from SDF based on community input. It kicked off its 11th round, which will include a built-in startup bootcamp for early applicants run in conjunction with DFS Labs. After including an incredible 10 rounds as of last quarter, we thought it was time to put together an overview of SCF's history over on the community blog. It's pretty extensive. Obviously, it's been running a long time, having been around since 2016. It's one of the oldest funds in the blockchain industry. We've had nearly 400 winners and funded almost 200 million XLM based on community input, which is kind of one of the things that sets it apart from others like it. So I highly recommend taking a read of that sometime. The team also launched a new SCF website and handbook just in time for those of you participating in round 11. And we're looking forward to kicking off the bootcamp virtually tomorrow. And I can't wait to see what this round has in store. We have some updated initiatives and resources this quarter aimed at reaching more diverse pools of developers, entrepreneurs, and people who want to learn about blockchain in general. And that includes gamified coding experience Stellar Quest, which introduced a pioneer quest. So that is kind of designed to improve onboarding. It's launched rewards for learning and a new website, and added a level 3, which covers advanced concepts for those who are further along on their Stellar learning journeys. We also put out tons of new developer doc content this quarter, adding some more fundamentals content, an encyclopedia, sounds fancy, and a glossary, changing things on the back end for a more seamless user experience, and adding supercharged search functionality. All of this, plus Sorabonathon First Light, as Justin talked about, is intended to reach and retain more devs in the Stellar community. And then finally, I'd like to just share some additional updates related to our DE&I activities at SDF. We established a diversity, equity, and inclusion DE&I strategy team earlier this year. This is a cross-functional team at SDF that has been tasked with assessing diversity within the Stellar ecosystem and how we are doing against our 2022 building block of demanding and promoting DE&I overall. They've been tasked with looking at DE&I across work, including SDF's investments, the Stellar Community Fund participation, the Stellar Discord, and SDF staff. These are some of the lenses through which we're examining our direct impact. The strategy team is also working on conducting some primary research, hopefully for later this year, and we should have more to share on this soon. And then kind of a tangentially related point is that SDF also responded to the U.S. House Financial Services Committee's request for diversity data this quarter, and we provided information about our workforce, our board, our DE&I policies, and our suppliers, and just that's kind of in order to show that we make DE&I a priority as an organization. So that's all the programmed content we have this time. I will turn it back over to Carolyn for Q&A.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks so much, everyone. Okay, as a reminder before we jump in, if you have any questions for the group, please make sure that you drop them into the Q&A tab on Zoom, and we'll get to as many as we can. So first, I will start with one maybe for Justin. Someone asks, is there anywhere to see the list of relevant assets?
That's a really good question. So there is not currently a place to see the criteria for listing relevant assets, but it's a really good idea, and we should publish a list, the criteria. Essentially, relevant assets is, there are so many different assets on the Stellar network, and you can view them a lot of different ways. As we were starting to put together these reports, we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on assets that really did connect to real world financial rails. And so we did create a list of criteria, basically assets that are tethered to real financial instruments is the general idea. Most of them are fiat currencies. Some of them are also tethered to other cryptocurrencies. Some of them are tethered to other kinds of securitized assets that are issued on Stellar. And there is a sort of list of criteria that we use to determine what makes what we call relevant assets. Anyone can come up with their own sort of curated list of the assets that they care about on Stellar and watch the growth of that. For our list of relevant assets, it is a very good idea to publish the criteria that we use. And I appreciate that suggestion. I think we should do it, but we don't have one right now publicly.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, great. Denelle, maybe this is one for you. Does Stellar have any plans to start an NFT marketplace?
Oh, so if you mean the Stellar Development Foundation, the answer is no. The Stellar Development Foundation leaves a lot of these types of things open to the ecosystem, and we've already seen some really awesome ecosystem participants like Lightmint and Blue Marble who have already created some great NFT platforms for folks to be able to go put their assets up there and engage with the ecosystem and the community there. So the SDF will not be, because the ecosystem is already filling this in, which is awesome.
Thanks, Denelle. Good clarification. And this is, I guess, one for anyone who wants to take it. Someone asks, who created and owns this blockchain technology?
So the wonderful thing about blockchain technology is that when it's an open public network like the SDF, no one owns it, and no one single entity or person controls it. And that's the beautiful thing. Justin went through all of the different the numbers regarding the different nodes and those that are operating validators on the network. And the thing that's also awesome about Stellar is the way that the Stellar consensus mechanism works. It's not subject to, and could never be subject to, a 51% attack, which in those attacks, as many of you might know, it's one entity can gain 51% control of the network. That just can't happen here. There's the consensus mechanism is something that I really recommend you folks take a look at. There's a lot of documentation and descriptions about it on the stellar.org website. it's I think it's pretty remarkable when you think about the fact that you get to select your quorum slice and the folks that you trust in the network as a validator. It's all sort of independent in terms of your determination. We actually balance anonymity with the notion that if you're a validator and you want people to trust you, you should put on your TOML file who you are so that people can feel comfortable about putting their trust in you with respect to validation. So there's just a lot of really cool things in the consensus mechanism, which make it so that it's not subject to the 51% attack, and also demonstrates that lots of contributors come in to play a part in the development of the code base and of the future of the Stellar blockchain. So no one owns it, no one controls it. In fact, one of the things that happened, which I don't like to highlight because of course it shows that there was a small flaw in the system with respect to Horizon, but our stuff went offline about 1.5 years ago in terms of the SDF's Horizon feed and also our validator, and the network continued to participate. I mean, the network continued to operate without us. So I think that's a really important feature that demonstrates that even though that we do take a lot of care and a lot of contribution to the network, we don't own or control it either.
Thanks, Denelle. That was great. So for Justin, a couple questions about Soroban. In Soroban-a-thon First Light, what is the total allocated funds from the first 100 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. Soroban-a-thon First Light is scheduled to run until December 15th. And so basically any qualified submission that comes in that time, you know, from an eligible participant will receive 250 to 3,000 lumens. There is a limit that we set to the amount that we would give away, and I'd have to verify what it is. But the truth is that it's a very small program, a tiny fraction of that fund. And it's something that is really, we're still early in preview releases of Soroban. And so this is like, this is not like the main big, huge giveaway program. This is like the beginning of a way to sort of like incentivize people to experiment. And so overall, I think it will be a tiny fraction of that amount of money. And again, it's time boxed till December 15th, which is the deadline. So I'd have to check to see what the upper limit is. But the truth is, I don't think we're going to get anywhere where even near where we set it, because it is just like such a small initial starter program. I think that if you're interested in seeing what happens with that fund, what you really need to do is join the Stellar Dev Discord, because that's where we're going to announce every time that we have a new incentive program that we're launching. That's where it's going to get announced first. And Soroban-a-thon First Light, again, is like sort of the small starter. Most of the programs that follow, the subsequent programs, will actually be much, much sort of bigger programs.
Great, thanks, Justin. More to come, so join us in the Stellar Dev Discord. Denelle, here's one for you. How can Soroban assets interact with Stellar Classic?
I saw that question in the thread. It's that was a very good question in terms of, it's an issue that we're working through right now. We actually do have interoperability between Classic assets to Soroban. Not all of them right now will be interoperable at first launch, but there will be ways to be able to ensure. I think the question went into issues around whether there's going to be AMM in the DEX and how those will be able to interact with the Soroban smart contracts. So this is actually a really important issue and something that the teams that and also the ecosystem we're working on right now. There needs to be interoperability, and right now there is going to be some. I think that what I encourage you to do is get involved in the discussions around that. Get involved by going to Stellar Discord and really engaging on that. But there's no, we hope what's going to happen with Soroban is that Soroban is going to bring even more liquidity into the Stellar network, so that even though we have Soroban as the assets are different, they will interoperate, and you will be able to leverage not just what's in Soroban, but also go back into Classic. The hope is that Classic is going to be super, super crazy valuable for payments as it is today, and that we can leverage the liquidity in Soroban and the smart contracts there to be able to make that even more seamless in terms of the usage and the liquidity that's available to everyone through it. So anyway, this is definitely an issue that we've addressed and that we're still working through with respect to all assets. But I encourage you to get involved. That would be super awesome, because clearly you have interest in what's happening there.
Well, thanks, Denelle. And we have another question from someone wondering about the Anchor platform. So they ask, can someone briefly discuss the features and abilities of the Anchor platform, or is there a link where we can read about it ourselves? So I can tell you that the address to read more about it is stellar.org/anchor platform. But Denelle, maybe you want to talk like a little bit high level about it as well?
Sure. The Anchor platform does is it brings together some really important stellar ecosystem proposals like SEP 31 and a few others that it comes in so that you can actually really easily integrate as an anchor, and you can become an anchor very simply, which creates this interoperability between wallets and other partners that want to connect up and use you as an anchor. So it really tried to streamline that process. We started with SEP 31, which is really one of the most complicated integration points, and we've made it super easy, as I said, weeks instead of months. But there's a lot more detail, and it's probably just a great idea to take a look on the website so that you can fill in the areas that you want to look at. But again, stellar ecosystem proposals, and it combined them all into an API, which is super awesome.
Thanks, Denelle. Okay, so I have a couple policy related questions here. Lauren or Denelle, maybe you could handle some of these. So what has been the biggest challenge of SDF so far? And then I also have another one about how SDF is clearly engaged on the policy front. How engaged have you been in the EU, which seems to be moving faster?
I'll just jump in really quickly and I'll talk about the challenge one, and then I'm going to let Lauren talk about the EU and other policy issues. The biggest challenge for the SDF has always been the chicken and the egg issue, which is like we need to be able to, we needed from the outset, and from when I came on, the team had already been really trying to grow the ecosystem. But yet you need volume on the ecosystem and you need liquidity in the ecosystem to be able to create that kind of growth. So it's like we're trying to do it all at the same time in terms of not just the SDF, but the ecosystem as a whole. And so that's a big challenge, but we've, I think, done an awesome job working with this amazing ecosystem to make it so that everyone kind of comes together at once and brings the liquidity, brings the volume, brings the use cases. So I think that initially it was really getting those use cases to be able to be very active on the network, and that to make that happen, you needed volume and you needed liquidity. And I think we finally actually over the last couple of years have sort of come together as an ecosystem with all these awesome developers out there to have both. So I think the challenge is always going to be there because we're going to continue to push and want it to be bigger, better, faster, all these different things as a whole ecosystem together. But I think that has been and will continue to be just a source of the challenge, that things don't happen fast enough for us because we want everyone to be able to take full advantage of all of the amazing things that can be available and can be useful on Stellar. So we're just going to keep pushing, but yeah, those are some of the challenges. And now Lauren.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I think something related to that is actually then telling, all of these amazing real world use cases to mainstream audiences so they build confidence and trust in, this trustless environment, particularly when we're engaging with policymakers. It's going to be a challenge to grow confidence in a new thing. Change is hard. And so it's really, incumbent on us, and that it can be a challenge on educating and sharing our story and like talking about all the incredible work everyone is doing in this ecosystem to make these real world use cases and how that differentiates our network, in general from, and creating equitable access to the global financial system. I think, we have a really compelling story to tell. It's just that we need to just kind of make sure we're heard, and it's noisy out there. So that can definitely be a challenge. And I think maybe I'll start the EU policy one, and Denelle, if you want to chime in. I think obviously we engage in the US a lot because, we're based here and we want the US to be a leader on the policy front in digital assets. We think that they can set the tone and other people might follow suit. At the same time, the EU is obviously very active. They just passed MiCA. And so that's an exciting development. And we were obviously, consulting and participating in that. And we're growing our policy team. We actually just brought on a new head of policy, Leslie Chavkin. We have an international policy lead. So I think that is definitely going to be growing in the year to come. Denelle, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Yeah, no, I think you summed it all up very well. I think that we just want to make, one of the things on policy is that there is no country or regulatory body that is more important than any other, because no matter the size of the regulatory body, it has a big impact once regulation comes in. And so we try so hard to be able to really understand and keep abreast of what's going on globally. Having a policy team that I like to call tiny but mighty is a really great way to be able to do this, because they spend a lot of time focusing outside. We really need leaders in this space, leaders from a regulatory framework, but we want leaders who actually want to dig in a bit so that they can make policy at a principle level instead of at a detailed level, because if it's detailed, oftentimes it gets behind pretty quickly. So this is actually one of my favorite areas to spend time on. We have such a great team who really pays attention here, and there's so much more to do. And as Lauren just mentioned, like having those use cases and things that we can talk about to get regulators comfortable that this technology isn't out there to just try to create opportunities for fraud and challenge for them is really important. So this is why it's so fun to see what everyone's developing on the network.
Well said. Thank you both. We're technically over time, but I want to fit in a couple more questions. So first, maybe Lauren, we have someone interested in the marketing grants who would like to know where to find more information. Can you help them with that?
Yes, we will ping a link. I'll put a link in the chat. We have an overview page and also obviously a page specifically for the marketing grants where you can apply. And if you're wondering kind of the status, in August, we put out a blog post that kind of talks about what's been distributed so far, because we hit the 1 million mile mark milestone of getting $1 million in grants out. So they are going out. It is an active program and you can apply, and we'll ping the link in the chat.
Thanks, Lauren. And this one is for Justin, maybe. Someone asks, will there be any cross-chain project that connects Stellar with other networks right from the launch in Q2 2023? I think they're talking about Sorbonne.
I think they're talking about Sorbonne, but I also think they're talking about bridges. And another exciting thing that I don't actually think we mentioned is that earlier this year, SDF's set up or released a bridge bounty, where essentially we offered these $1 million in Lumen bounties to different projects for building bridges between Stellar and other blockchain ecosystems. And in October, I guess it was technically next quarter, but October 10th, we announced the 5 winners of the bridge bounty. And so they are all currently working on bridges between Stellar and other blockchain networks. I think it's Allbridge, Axelar, Cubist, Caledon, and Multichain. And you know, this is part of, yeah, thanks. This is part of like a belief that we have, right? It is important to have a multi-chain future. Stellar can fit in with other blockchains in order to do a lot of good for the world. And as part of doing that, we want to make sure that we are encouraging developers, and especially developers outside of SDF, to work to connect Stellar to other blockchain ecosystems. So the Bridge Bounty, those 5 different projects, we're very, very excited to see what they come up with.
And hopefully it doesn't end with those 5 projects. I think one of the things that's really important is cross-chain interoperability is the future. It has to be the future. We don't want one chain to rule in this space, because then we end up with the exact same financial the financial system that we have today, which is limiting. And so the notion of having multi-chain creates this opportunity for so much innovation and creativity that we really want to see that happen. So if anybody has any other ideas about how they want us to go multi-chain, please reach out. Discord is the best place for that.
Thanks, guys. And one more question. Someone is asking if they can take Denelle to Coachella. Denelle, do you have anything to say to that?
I love the idea of it. Sounds really fun.
Appreciate the hustle. Okay, great. So that's all the time that we have. Thank you all for staying with us a little bit over time. And as always, you can watch out for the recap on SDF's blog later today. The quarterly report will be up there along with the recording. And you can always find the full report on our quarterly report landing page at stellar.org. So thanks again for being here, and we will see you next quarter. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.